Hello, so we're going to go over a brief tutorial over book jacket creation here. And what I'm going to be doing is replicating some examples that I find. Of course, when you guys create your own book jackets, you won't be copying something that's existing. You'll be doing something original in keeping with our aesthetic manifestos. But I just want to show you how to use some of the tools and how to access some of the resources. So I'm just going to be copying existing stuff to kind of show you how it might be done. Some of the things we're going to get out of this tutorial here, you're going to see a little bit of how to use Photoshop, one of the primary Adobe tools. It's a raster graphic editing tool. We're also going to get a chance to look at InDesign a little bit. It's a typesetting program, so it compiles different kinds of images and text and that sort of thing all into one big document. We're going to see how to access some Creative Commons resources using the Creative Commons search. We're going to get some image resources for our cover. And we're also going to use one of our own resources. You might remember we took that photo of Aaron in class to use. And remember that anything you create, so a photograph you take, you have copyright over. So it's perfectly fine to use. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so to get started, we're going to need to find a cover. I'm going to use the same one we looked at in class. So I'm just going to search for Frankenstein covers here. And of course, I'm just replicating something. You'll be creating original work. This is the one we used. Let me just go ahead and blow that up. And you can see there are a couple of things going on in this cover. One is that it's got an image up here, right? And then it has this sort of text area down here. So we'll deal with the image in Photoshop, and then once we're finished with the image, we'll go ahead and pull that into InDesign, which really has better text handling capability and that sort of thing. And we can see in the image itself, that's where we will start. It's got basically three elements, right? It's got these sort of purplish mountains in the background, these purple mountains of majesty. We've got these reddish rocks up front, and then this sort of shadowy figure skulking across them, presumably Frankenstein's monster, whose name is not Frankenstein. That's actually the doctor. Anywho, so we need to find these elements, and what we're going to do is start with the Creative Commons search to get some imagery. And if you go to the assignments page here on our course site and then the Publics project, you can see under resources here, we've got a link to the Creative Commons search. And you can find different kinds of media here, audio, video even. You'll see for images, there's kind of two tabs here. We've got Google and we've got Flickr. These checks up here, they ask, do you want something that's licensed to be modified or adapted? We certainly do, right? Otherwise, you can just, republish it, but it can't be changed. But we're going to change it. And then it asks, do you want to use it for commercial purposes? Now, we can uncheck this if we want, because this is just for school. But if we were to actually, create a book cover and we wanted to use some stuff, we'd have to check this so that we could find stuff that it's okay to use commercially. I'm going to leave it checked just to demonstrate that. But again, for our class, you do not have to have that checked. Okay, so I'm going to search for mountains first, see what we come up with. Go. And I could check Google here. It's got some options. I'm going to go with Flickr because I've already kind of gone through here and I know what they've got available. We know these sort of ones, these are okay, right? I mean, if we look at these, they're close. I mean, they're not really what we're looking for, but we could work with them. I kind of looked beforehand and I found some that I think are even better if we look a little bit further. I think it was, oh, here we go, right there. I think these, and see these also have these nice clouds here. These might give us a little bit more to work with. There are a couple of differences, right? These are very kind of tall and peaky, and they're sort of larger in the center, and then they taper off here on the sides. This, you can see it's larger over here. But this, I think, is something we could work with, and I kind of like the background here. It's got clouds instead of just blue, and you can see that goes with our picture. So I'm just going to click here, and it gives us the option to view all sizes. Excuse me. And we can see it's got a lot of size choices here, and it's got the original here, which is quite large, right? I mean, it's quite big. And as we remember from our discussion in class, there's a relationship between physical dimensions, right, like height and width, and resolution. So even if it's low resolution, as long as the picture's big enough, you can shrink it down physically, and the resolution can go up. It's like, as we discussed, if you have a balloon that you inflate and then you put dots on it, if you deflate the balloon, those dots kind of come together. So we're just going to download the original size here, and I'm using Chrome, the web browser here. You can use whatever you want. I'm just pointing that out. So it's got this. So we got a pretty big picture here. I'm going to go ahead and open this up in Photoshop. Okay, should be here on my desktop. Let's see. I think that's it. Oh yeah, there she is. Okay, so we'll open that up. Okay, so there's our image. And we can see its actual size here if we go to image size. Let me drag this over. So we can see not only is it big, right? It's 10 inches across and 8 inches high. It's also already at print resolution 300. So this is a pretty darn big photo. That's great for our purposes. Okay, so I've got this one. Oh boy, my colleagues are chatting outside. Okay, so we got that. We've also got these red rocks up front. Let's see if we can find those. So we'll go back to our Creative Commons search. This time I'm just going to search for rocks. Okay, and these are some different. That's like a rock concert. There's some different things we can use here. We want to find something. Boy, they're really chatty. We want to find something that looks as close as we can to this. This is an option, although if we look at this, it's not perfect because it doesn't show the whole rock. It's kind of cut off, you know. Yikes. This is an idea. Oh, ladies, you're killing me. Oh, there we go. So this is the one that I think is really good because not only is it kind of the same shape, we can manipulate it to get it in that shape. Similar color, but it's also against this grayish white background, and that's really going to help us because we can take this background out without a lot of tedious erasing. So I will just download the original size here, and it's also large. Now I'll go ahead and open that up in Photoshop. So there it is. Now this is not print resolution, it's 180, but that's okay. It's not that large either, but for our purposes it's going to be alright. Because we're going to be manipulating it anyway. It is going to pixelate a little bit because we're going to have to stretch it and that sort of thing. But it's going to be fine for our purposes, as we'll see near the end. Alright, so that's fine. Okay, so what we're going to do now is actually create a new image. If we look back at our cover, let me pull that up, you can see that this is, as we said, about 6 across, 6 inches by 9 inches. But you'll notice only about, 60% of it is taken up by an image. So I'm not going to make the whole thing an image. So I will, let's see, go to File and New here. Let me just set that on inches instead of pixels. Let me put my width at 6, but I'm only going to put my height at around, let's say 7.5, right? My resolution is 300, that's good, that's print resolution. Color mode, we don't need to discuss this too much. Generally RGB or red, green, blue is for screen images, and the other main one is CMYK, which stands for cyan or blue, magenta or red, yellow or yellow, and K or black. That tends to be used for print because print industries actually use those 4 colors to generate everything else. We're going to leave it on RGB just for convenience sake. It doesn't much matter for what we're doing, but some of the filters we're going to use, you need to be in RGB color space. Okay, so we've got that created, so I'm going to bring my mountains over here. You see you've already got them selected. I just need to select all these and bring them over. Let me zoom out a bit so they're quite big. I'm going to select all here and copy. I just did that through Control A and Control C. You can do it through, edit and copy and that sort of thing. right, so I'm going to plunk that down here. And now you'll see that what I've pasted, it's much larger, see, than what I've made. So this little arrow button up here, if I drag that around, you can see there's a lot more than what I can see in the window. Remember, we've got our layers panel over here, so we've got our background layer, and then we've got the thing we just pasted on top. This little eyeball means do you want it visible or not, so I can make them invisible or whatever. What I'm going to do is I want to manipulate this image to look a little bit more like our cover. So you can see these are kind of tall and peaky, so they're very kind of stretched. They also go up to the top, which our image doesn't do. So I'm going to manipulate that a little bit. I'll go ahead and, let's see, we'll zoom out a hair. It looks like this is our tallest one over here, and then we've got that one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of set this near the top, and I'm going to kind of smush this together and then stretch it out a little bit. That is going to distort it to a degree, but for our purposes, it's going to be okay. So what I can do is just click on the transform controls here, and it's going to give me this box that'll let me manipulate this image. You can see I'll just drag it around like that. I'm going to undo that. Alternately, you can just go up here to edit and transform, and it'll let you pick which one you want to do. Scaling, rotating, that sort of thing. I'm just going to turn on the transform controls because that'll let me do lots of different things at once, although really all I'm going to do is smush it. I'm going to go ahead and put this up here. So what I'm going to want to do is kind of fill out the rest, but I also want to stretch those, right? So I'll do that. Let's see what happens if I compress this. No, I don't want to do that because I want the mountains nice and tall. So I'll get this up here. You can see right now it's badly pixelated because this is a preview mode. But once I get where I want it to be, I just hit enter or return. It's going to lock that in. I'm going to turn off the transform controls. So now you can see it doesn't look as pixelated or distorted. It's just got this sort of weird angle on things. But for our source, you can see that's pretty much what it looks like. What's going on in the source here is what's called the pathetic fallacy, which is not what it sounds like. It means when the external environment mirrors a character's internal emotional state. I don't know, it's just news for the future. So we've got that. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and add the rocks in the front. So we'll go to that image, and I'll copy and paste it over using the same process. Okay, and you can see that it's pasted now. It's layer 2, so you can kind of think about these things as sort of papers stacked together, right? So this is the top one, and this one's underneath it, and this one's underneath them both. So when looking at our image here of the rocks, you notice we've got a couple of problems. The main one probably is that there's this white around it, right? So we've got to get rid of that, otherwise it just doesn't look right. So we'll go in how to do that. And then there's some other issues as well in terms of getting these rocks to look like our source file. Let me pull that up. Right, so they've got sort of this downward slope over here, and they're kind of maroon. So we'll deal with those things kind of one at a time. All right, first things first, getting rid of the white. The good news is, and this is why it was a great find to get this rock with this white background here. Let me zoom in a bit. Because when there's an image in front of sort of a single color like this, we can use the magic wand tool and just sort of select it all at once. What the magic wand tool is, and it's up here, if it's not in your toolbar here, you can just click on the quick selection tool and hold down your click, and it'll bring up the other tools that are on that same button. You can do that with really a lot of the tools over here, as you see. There's just too many tools to list out, so they kind of stack them together. Anyway, the magic wand tool here, there it is. When you click on it, as you'll see how it selects, you can see this dotted line, it selects similar imagery. The way that works is it compares the color of pixels to its neighbors. So you can see it's actually kind of jutted in here because it's white as well. It doesn't jump over here even though there's the same color because the magic wand tool selects contiguous pixels, right? So they have to be touching. And you can set how close the colors have to be up here in this box that says tolerance. Let me deselect this to show you what I'm talking about. If I set a real low tolerance like 1, what that means is it's only going to select things of identical color. So if I click this, you can see these are all the same, but it's missing over here because this shade is slightly different. But if I bump up the tolerance too high, let me, I don't know what the actual, yeah, 255 is the top. Let's do that. Now see, it selected everything because the difference, it's allowed to select things that are pretty different, right? So we need to find a happy medium there. I'm going to put it on 30 here. Let me deselect what we've got. And now when I click here, you can see it's pretty much getting everything we want it to get. And now that that's selected, all I have to do is hit delete or backspace here or whatever, and it takes care of it. And I just remove my selection there. So that's the first step. We've got the white removed. We can manipulate this. Let me zoom out a hair. One issue though is you can see these rocks are a lot smaller than the background, and if you look at our source picture, they really take up the whole foreground here. So we need to fix that. What we're going to have to do is kind of work with this thing to stretch it out and maybe rotate it a little bit to match our source file. In fact, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a couple of things. First thing I'm going to do is go up here to Edit and Transform and flip horizontal. What that's going to do is what it sounds like. It's going to make it a mirror image. There. Okay, so now it's kind of sloping downward this way. I did that because if you look at our source file, it also kind of runs from the upper left to the lower right. So it's just going to be easier for me if I just mirror image this. Zoom in just a hair. Now I also need to make these take up the whole foreground, right? So I'm going to have to do some stretching there. And pretty much I'll be doing the same procedure as I did with our background mountains. So I'll just go ahead and turn on the Show Transform controls. I'm doing that instead of going up to Edit, Transform, Scale because I might also want to rotate this a little bit as well to make it fit a little better. So I'll put this over here and I'll stretch it out a little bit horizontally. And you can see it gets really distorted. It's not going to stay that distorted because it's just in a preview when it's doing that. One thing I'm going to do though is you'll notice if I just go like this, see how it gets really kind of stretched out and it looks funny? What you can do to ameliorate that is just stretch it proportionally, right? And the best way to do that, you see I can move this around and it kind of shifts and changes. If I hold down the Shift key, see how it'll only scale proportionally? See, it locks like this. That'll make sure that everything stays in the same proportion, and it avoids some of that weird kind of stretching that you get if you just do one side, see? So I'm going to go ahead and click here. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and I'm going to stretch this out. I'll move it down to get sort of a better take on it. And it looks like it's going to need to get stretched a little bit more. Yeah, that's probably okay. And then I'll just stretch it a little bit horizontally here. Let me just back out so I can, whoops, get a better angle on it. And there we go. That's probably going to be okay for our purposes. One thing also that I could do, in fact I will go ahead and do it, I'm going to rotate it a little bit to give it that down slope. All I have to do is put my mouse out here. You can see how the arrow changes to this little curve. That'll let me just rotate it a hair, and now I can position it a little bit better. And when I'm done making all my changes, I'll hit enter, and they'll be applied. And now when we zoom in, you can see it's not as funky and pixelated as it was. Still going to adjust this just a hair. Okay, but now looking back at our source here, I can see that the rocks are a lot lower, so let me go ahead and just tweak that a hair. Yeah, you can see these are up too far. So let me just drag those down a bit. This is probably right. And again, this doesn't have to be perfect, it's a mock-up. One thing though, you see this little notch out of the rock? Let me zoom in on that. You see this over here? There's this notch. What happened is when we were getting rid of that white background, we got some of the snow that was on this rock. So now it looks a little weird. It's not a big problem, but we should fix it, and it's not a hard fix at all, really. What you can see is we've got 3 layers. We've got the background, which really we're not using because it's covered by the mountains here. We got the mountain layer, and then we've got this rock layer. What we're going to do is insert another layer between the rocks and the mountains, and we're going to color that the same color as the snow. The reason why we don't want to just draw directly on the rock is because it's really hard. You know, it's hard to try and fit it in there. And if we drew it on the mountains, then there'd just be this big white blob. And if we wanted to then move our rocks later, you know, we'd be out of luck because our snow would be attached to this, you know, mountain picture. So we're just going to go ahead and slip in a new layer. I'm going to go to layer 1 here and layer, new layer. And you can see it wants to call it layer 3 because it just goes up in numbers. But because it's going to be between these two, I'm going to call it something else. I'll just call it like 1B, let's say. Right, so there it is. There's nothing on it right now, but we're going to put our snow there. What I'll do is, well, first let me show you really quick. If I draw on this layer, let me just pull up our brush. You see what happens? You see how you can see it? Because it's between the mountains and the rock covers it up, but it's on top of the mountains. Let me just undo that really quickly. So what I want to do is just kind of fill it in here. I don't want to use just straight up white because this snow is kind of an off-white. What I can do is use this thing that looks like an eyedropper. In fact, it's the eyedropper tool. And when I use that, if I click, it'll just change the color to whatever I clicked on, right? So if I click up here, you see it turns sky blue. If I click over here, it turns this sort of reddish brown. And if I click on my snow, it turns off-white. And now I can go to my brush tool. Just a couple of words about that. You'll notice up here you can set both the size of the brush, right? Here's this sort of circle. If I move this up, you know, it gets bigger. If I move it up more, it gets bigger. For ours, I don't want it to be that big. This is good to start with, and then we'll use a smaller brush for fine work. But it's also got this thing that says hardness. That lets you set the edge of the brush to be either kind of wet and fuzzy or crisp. Let me show you. If I turn the hardness way down to, say, 9% there, watch what happens when I draw. See how it looks like spray paint? Compare that if I turn the hardness way up here to 100%. See how that's crisp, like a pencil? Now, let me get rid of both of those. But that's how you set the edge. And you can do that with an eraser too, which is really useful. I'm going to set our hardness for about 30-ish. Yeah, 30's good. And I'm just going to fill in here, and you can see it's doing its job. And I want a wet edge because when I get to the end here, I don't want it to just cut off like a razor. I want it to look, you know, like snow piled up on a rock. I'm going to put my size down lower here to do a little bit finer work. Just flesh that out. And there we go. Now it looks like snow kind of lapping over a rock. And you can see even up close what we just did. It looks like it belongs, right? I mean, you can barely tell. If you didn't know that we fixed that, you'd think it was part of the original picture. So that's that. And now we can go ahead and put in our figure. Okay, so if we look at our figure on our source file here, it's kind of the shadowy figure skulking away, presumably Frankenstein's monster. And you'll remember we took a photo of Aaron to use as our stand-in for Frankenstein. Thank you very much, Aaron. And there's no copyright issue with that because I took the photo, so I have the copyright, so no big deal there. I'm going to go ahead and select this and copy it over into our picture. Let me make sure I'm on, yeah, okay, the right layer here. So there are a couple things we got to do here. Probably first we need to make sure she's upright. So we'll go to Edit, Transform, and it's got this convenient rotate 90 degrees counterclockwise. There she is. And we're going to have to scale her and that sort of thing, obviously, because she's too big right now. But the main thing is getting her out of this background, right? Now, unlike our rocks, which were on a white background, that was easy. It was just a Magic Wand tool. Magic Wand tool is not going to work as well for this because it's a complex background. It'll do some things. Right, see here it's pretty close. We could probably tinker with the tolerance and try and get that. Her pant cuffs are pretty close to the carpet color, so that's going to be tricky. Some things it might get, like maybe, oh, like there, right? So you did a good job there. We'll go ahead and do that. But mostly, see, we're just going to have to kind of get in there. We could try and select her rather than the background, but even that's going to be tricky. We're probably just going to have to go in there and erase. That's not a big deal, though. It's usually what you end up doing. So let's talk about the eraser tool. This is it over here. And we've got 3 modes. Right now it's on block. Block's interesting because it always stays the same little block here, right? If I erase right here, it's this little block. If I zoom in a bit, let me just kind of zoom towards my blocks. See how it's still the same little piece like this? No matter how far you zoom in or out, it stays the same shape. That's different from the brush and pencil, the other two options. They're a set size, so they're going to, right here it's this size, but if you zoom out, it's that size, see? The pencil, as you would assume, it has kind of a hard edge. The brush, which you can use, it has an edge you can set, so it can be very hard, but it can also be very soft. Let me go ahead and just push this down. You can see you get a very wet edge here, which can be really useful when doing what we're about to do, because if it's very hard and crisp, it's almost certain you're either going to cut off some of her or you're going to show some of the background. With a wet edge, it just gets kind of fuzzy, so you can't really tell that anything's going on there. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in and erase her. I'm just going to do this really sloppy. I mean, this is just a mock-up. Normally, we'd take a lot of care doing this, but for right now, I'm just gonna go for it. Okay, so I'm just going to draw this down, and you can see what's happening, right? The mountains are popping up because I'm erasing this layer, which is above the mountains. Okay, she's got these red shoes. We might cut those out. Nah, we'll leave them for right now. Okay, we'll go up here. We'll get in a little bit closer. So I'll change the size of my brush here. That's going to be a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and make sure we get her legs. And we'll sweep around the other one here. And you can see because I'm using the brush eraser, this sort of wet edge, it's not giving me this just a weird break between the background and her. It's kind of a feathered break. Whoopsie. Okay, and we want to get her side. Oh, crap. That's the other tip is don't click and erase for a long time. Do it sort of in short strokes, because what will happen is exactly what happened to me. You'll be going along great, you'll make one crazy mistake, and then it'll all be ruined. Okay, so we'll just do her elbow, and now we'll do the rest of her side. Okay, and now we'll go over here. Somebody's in the background just got their face erased. They didn't check who that was. We'll zoom in a bit here and we'll do this little crook. I'm going to need a smaller brush, or I could use the block. I'm going to use a small brush. And we don't have to get this perfect for what we're doing. This is just fine. Make a larger brush here. There we go. Okay, and this, oh, we got that with the magic wand, that's right. Make sure to get her hair up here. Might actually, because this is, she's a model for Frankenstein, we might actually cut this off just to make it a little more like our source file. There we go. Well, that actually looks pretty different, doesn't it? Okay. And we'll get our arms here. And there's just a little bit there between her hand. We'll put just a thin line sort of between her arms so that you can tell it's an arm. I'll need a pretty small brush for that. Even smaller. Okay. Oop, and I blew it. Okay. Ugh. I'm using a terrible mouse here. This is going to be a frustrating challenge. There we go. There we go. Perfect. And we'll make sure you can see that this is a hand. All right, blammo. Okay, so now that we've got sort of her trimmed around, see, that's the tough part. Now we can just erase all this other whatnot. And for that we can use, we could just use a giant brush if we wanted to. We could blow it way up and do that. I like to use just the selection tool here. Let me zoom out a bit. And I'm going to just like select this whole thing and hit delete, and it'll take care of that. Yeah, thank you. Whole thing over here, take care of that. And we'll just polish it up. Okay, now for here, I will start to use a eraser, and I'll make it the pencil because I don't need soft edges anymore. Zoom in and just, ooh, that's too big. There we go. Just get rid of this. And let's see. Whoop. A couple of spots over here I missed. And I'll get rid of all this stuff. And I could, if I want to, just use the selection tool here to zoom in and kind of knock this stuff out. Okay, and where was my eraser here? So this is the sort of most tedious part. What you might want to do is, if you were, doing something similar to this, have your model stand in front of like a white wall, right? Then this would have been a piece of cake. It would have been just like our rocks. Anyway, there is our Frankenstein. Sorry, Aaron. Oops. And I missed this part at the top. No big deal. Let's just knock that out. Okay. And now I can move her around into position. Now we're going to need to scale her down a bit. And I'm going to change her proportions to look a little bit more Frankensteinian. Right? It's a little more masculine, a little wider, that kind of thing. So we'll manipulate her a little bit. And by the time we're finished, it's not going to look like Aaron anyway. So another thing I'm going to do is I might flip her because her feet might be in the wrong position. Let's try edit and transform flip horizontal. Yeah, see, that might be better for feet. Oops, and there's a little bit I need to erase right there. Okay, and let me just scale her down a little bit here. And yeah, not that squished, but I am going to kind of expand her out here to look more like the monster in the picture. Okay, and let's see, let's find a good spot. That's probably good. Let's look at our source file again just to check. That's fine, that's fine. Okay, and I'll hit return here, or enter. And so we've stretched her out. She looks a little bit more like a monster. And again, thank you, Aaron, for being a good sport. So now we've really got the main elements of it. But, I mean, looking at it, right, when you look at this, there's a clear difference between what we've got right now and the source file, right? A couple of things. We've got the colored mountains up here. They're more purple. We've got the more maroon rocks here. We've got sort of a dark tint on the figure. And also, this is an illustration, right? I mean, this looks drawn, whereas ours looks like photos that have been stitched together. So we can address that right now, and we're going to do it layer by layer. What we're going to do is we'll start with Erin, and let me just pull her up. And one thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this thing from her shirt. That was a logo. Well, it still is. It's just it's been flipped. And one thing we could do is use that eyedropper tool, right, to get the color of her shirt and then just paint over it. We could do that. You can see, though, it doesn't look great. You can tell it's being painted over, basically. So we're going to do something a little bit more sophisticated. We're going to use the clone stamp. Right here under the brush, there's this stamp tool. If you click on that, basically it gives us a stamp. We can change the size and the hardness again. And what we're going to do is I'm going to hold down Alt here, and I'm going to click down here on her shirt. Okay, now I release Alt. And when I start clicking, what's going to happen is it's going to copy. See where this little plus is? It's going to copy where I originally clicked to here. So as I drag this along, you can see what's happening. It's copying from the bottom part to the top part. I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush here. That's probably fine, actually. So I'll hit Alt, copy there, and let's see if we can knock this out. There we go. And I'll do the same thing. Maybe I'll copy from here. Alt and copy. And now I'll do this. Do you see how that looks much more like a shirt, right? It's not just paint, because it's basically cloning from one area to another. Do this, and we'll do one more. Oops, I'll probably have to do it that way, and then this way. There we go. Perfect. Well, I mean, you know, workable. See, when you zoom out, it doesn't look bad at all. Okay, so we got that. We might want to address her red shoes. I'm not sure Frankenstein wears red shoes. That is another literary figure. So there are a couple of things we could do there. We could, put a filter over them. We could just color them. That's probably what I'm going to do now. I am just going to sample the colors here from her jeans. Gives us this nice dark blue. And I'm just going to paint over them because they're going to be such a small detail. Use a smaller brush. Even smaller. Okay. And again, I mean, this is a little shoddy, but if this weren't a mock-up, we'd actually spend time on this. Okay. Let's see how this looks, because this might look goofy, but actually, when we apply our filters, it's probably not going to matter that much one way or another. Yeah, it's goofy, but it's not going to matter after our filters. We just want to get that red kind of concealed. Okay, that's pretty much, that'll probably work right there. What we want to do now is we want to adjust the tint of the layers so that the back gets this nice purple in the mountains. If I can pull that up again really quick. See, you got kind of purple back here, and it's got kind of red or maroon up here. We can set that in our image as well. Just have to go to the mountain layer here, and we'll go to layer, image adjustments. And there are lots of ways to manipulate color in here. Levels, hue and saturation, that sort of thing. I'm going to use levels, and this is what pops up. Sorry, I have two screens here. I'm going to manipulate the, let's do the blue, and I'm going to drag this over, and let's see what it looks like. Ooh, that's too green. That's better. If we go this way, it's too blue. That's good, right there. So this has got this kind of nice indigo color here. We'll hit OK. And now we'll deal with the red rocks. We'll make those a little bit more maroon. They're pretty close already. But I'll go to Image and Adjustments and Levels. And this time I'll deal with the red. And let's just, we'll just maroon these out a little bit. See if we cap it. Yeah, we don't want to do that. Okay. So that gives us some nice contrast. Now for Erin, what we're going to do is, let me just click on her level. We're just going to use a different adjustment here. We're going to use hue and saturation. One thing we can do, if we desaturate it, it's just going to break it down to grayscale, black and white. So we'll do that, and we'll turn down the lightness. It's just going to make her kind of a shadowy Frankenstein-like figure here. Right, so that's killed the red in her shoes. Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. All right, so we've got the colors set. Still, of course, though, there's a big difference here, which is ours looks like photos, and our source file is an illustration, so we can address that right now. And we're going to use filters, layer filters, to do that. I'm going to click on my mountain layer here, and I'm going to go up here to Filter. And you can see there's all these filters here. We're going to use one called Cutout. Now, you don't have to know what these things do. You don't have to memorize that because it gives you this little preview thing. Let me zoom out our image. So here's our mountain. Cutout is one that really makes photos look a lot like illustrations. You can see there's others here, like sponge painting, if you want it to look like it was sponge painted. And there's other things too, like, well, glass, right? It looks like it's made of glass. You can just sort of go through and play with these quite a bit. I just know from past experience what Cutout does. There are also these options over here, number of levels, edge simplicity, and edge fidelity. You can just kind of play with these. Basically, it's those things set, how many kind of shapes are you going to have in there, what kind of things are going to constitute a shape. What you can do is if you turn them way down, you'll see what happens, and then you can turn them way up and see what happens, right? So you can get kind of a sense of what each option is going to do. I'm going to put my simplicity just right here in the middle, and I'm actually going to tweak down my number of levels to about 6 to look closer to our illustration. That looks pretty good. We'll hit OK, and now you'll see it's been applied, right? Our rocks still look the same, Erin looks the same, but we've got a filter on the mountains. We'll do the same thing here with our rocks. If we go up to filter, you'll see cutout is already up here. What that'll do is the last filter you used, it'll remember, And if I click this, it'll just reapply that to the new layer. So I'll do that, and it'll take a moment. And now you see it's done the exact same thing to our rocks. It's use those same options. And now we'll do the same thing to Aaron, but we might want to tweak that one just a little bit more. I'm going to go to Artistic Cutout. We'll zoom this out a hair. Because see, this is with the same thing applied, and it looks a little fuzzy. Yeah, that looks a little more Frankensteinian. We want it ooh! Now see, this has got this nice little blend between her shirt. It looks like a tear because of the option I set here. Yeah, we want the fidelity way up. Number of levels we want way up. Simplicity we might actually want not all the way up. Yeah, we'll set it there. A little more Frankensteinian. Okay, there we go. And now if we zoom in, you can see, look at how look at how pretty Erin has changed. Now she looks like Frankenstein. We made it so that her shirt kind of blends into her pants in sort of a ragged way. We got rid of the red in her shoes. Her pants look like they're too small for her, which is a common thing with Frankenstein. He's got really long limbs. He wears that blazer, but his wrists poke out. That comes from the movie, of course. She's kind of slouched over here, and we've stretched her out. We got rid of her hair to look more like a male head. So there we go. If we look at our image and the source image, right? They're close. They're not identical, obviously. If they had to be identical, we could do that, but we'd be here for a long time. But there we go. We've got a pretty close image. If we wanted to manipulate things, we still can because they're in layers. If I wanted to move Aaron over a bit and say, no, I want you walking on this part of it, kind of in between the mountains, we can do that. We can even go in and change how these have had filters applied. Okay, but that's creating the image. So I'm going to cut here, and we will pull this into InDesign. I'm just going to go ahead and save this. Obviously, I'm going to save this. We'll call this, I think I've already got a Frank. Yeah, I've got Frank 1. We'll call this Frankenstein. Oops. And I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document. I'm also going to save it as a what's called a TIFF document. So I'll go to save as TIFF, which stands for Tagged Image File Format. And I will call this Frankenstein TIFF just to set it apart. The reason I'm doing that is not everything is going to be able to incorporate Photoshop files, but TIFF is a standard. It's just a standard raster format. We don't have to mess with most of this stuff. Nah, it's fine. All right, so we'll pause here, and then we'll get into InDesign. Okay, so here we are in InDesign. We don't really need that window. Turn off the character panel. I'm just going to go ahead and make a new document here. And this can seem a little confusing, but it's really not a big deal here. It's asking number of pages. Right now we just want one because we're doing that cover. It's asking here facing pages. And what that means is like a book, right? You know how there's a left page and a right page. We're just doing the cover right now, so we can uncheck that. All of these also can be changed later on. The page size. Now remember, we're not using standard page size. We're using 6 by 9 here, so I'll change that. Orientation is correct. Columns is not really going to matter because it's just this one page. Our margins, we're actually going to set our margins at 0. So we'll do that. And there we go. We have our, let me zoom out a bit. We have our 6 by 9 book cover. So the first thing we're going to do is put the Photoshop image that we created in here. I'll go to File and Place. And it was Frankenstein, Photoshop. Just hit OK. You'll see it gives me a little thumbnail here about where I want to place it. So I'm just going to place it here. And now I can move it into position. Ooh, it's a little bigger than I thought. Not a big deal, because we'll just we'll cover up some of the rock stuff down here. So if we look at our source file again, we're not going to do all this. We're just going to get the gist of it. But we've got this sort of purplish area. We'll do that. We'll put the title in here, and then we've got this little box that says Enriched Classic. Looks like there's sort of a dark line what's called a rule, separating the picture and the text area. So we'll do some of those things, but we're not going to spend the time to do the whole thing. All right, first thing, we'll put that box, that purple box in there. You can just create a box. Up here, this is the box tool. And you can just click and drag and you'll create a box here. Let me undo that one. We're going to have one that has no line on the outside, so no stroke, but it's going to be colored purple on the inside. So we set our box and line colors over here. This red line here, that means transparent, nothing. So right now, our box has nothing filling it up, no color inside, and no line on the outside. We don't want a line on the outside, so that's good, but we do want color in here. If we just double click on that, it lets us pick a color. I'm going to see if I can find a color that's already kind of close to that purple. I'm going to go up here to swatches. Yeesh. There's not, is there? We'll start here. I'll just put that away, and we'll just kind of work from here. This is getting closer down here. This kind of purple. Yeah, this is closer. Maybe want it a little darker. Anywho, so we'll use that as our interior color. Now when I draw this box, you'll see it'll fill up. Now I didn't draw it exactly right, but that's fine. I can just use this arrow tool up here. I'll drag it over, and I'm going to pop it right here in the corner. And now I'm going to click this other corner and just sort of drag it to fit. You'll notice that a lot of guides pop up, right? When I get over here, you maybe can't see this on the video, but these little green arrows pop up to show you that you're at the width of your document. I'm going to put it right, let's say here. It's not quite as big as our source file, but that's okay. This is how it would work. And you know, if we really cared, we could move this image way up here, right? And then just make this block bigger. I'm not going to do that though, since this is just a mock-up. Okay, so we've got our really purple block here. We want to add a horizontal rule or a black line across here to separate them. There is a line tool right up here, so I'll click on that. Now for the line tool, what I don't want, you know, a purple inside and no line. That doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to click right here. This sets the default, which is a black line with no fill. And I'm just going to draw my line here. Now, you know, it's tough to draw just a perfectly straight line, but if you hold the Shift key, it'll make it so that it has to be straight, right? No matter where you are here. See, this is without it pressed, this is with it pressed. That's really helpful. I'm going to stretch it all the way to the end here, and now I'm going to drag this one all the way to the end, and there are those green arrows telling me that I'm good. I'm just going to move this up. I'm using the arrow keys just to move this up to the border between these two. Thing of it now is, though, that's a really kind of, you know, it's a dim line there. Let's go to stroke here, and let's make that line fatter. Right now it's just 1 point. Let's bump it up to like 3. Yeah, that's a much nicer line. And it's more in keeping with our source here. In fact, they have probably a 4-point one there, but who cares? So we've got our dark lines separating them. We're going to have that box that says Enriched Classics. That sounds like a food product. Oops, wrong thing. Let's move on to our title next. And it looks like it says Frankenstein. That looks like Times New Roman. I mean, you can see it's some kind of thicker serif font. It's got a white kind of thin rule here, and then Mary Shelley. We won't deal with this stuff at the bottom. We don't have the space. So we will, we're just going to draw another box. You can turn any box into a text box. This one, however, we don't want a line, right? So it's set now to have no fill color. It does have a black line, and we don't want that because our source doesn't have a line around it. So I'm just going to go to color here and set this to nothing. So now I'm actually going to draw a box, and you'll see it, but it doesn't have any outline, and it doesn't have any fill. Right? There it is, but it doesn't really have anything on it. I'm going to go up to my text tool up here, this thing that looks like a T. Well, it is a T. It doesn't look like it. And I'm going to click in here. And I'm going to set my font here up at the top. We've got Times New Roman, great. I'm just going to type Frankenstein in caps. Cool. Now I want that a bit larger. Let's bump that up to, let's say 36. Might be too large. You can see the word is broken onto another line. That's okay. We can just stretch out our text box here. No trouble. You'll also notice there are some other guides that are popping up here in InDesign. You see when I move this block around, there's this pink line. That lets me know that my box is directly in the middle. It's centered. So I'm going to go ahead and center it. Of course, because my paragraph is aligned left, the actual word Frankenstein isn't centered. And I think it is. Yeah, it is here. So we'll go ahead and center align this. We'll just go to a paragraph here, and you can set that. And now I will put Mary Shelley, who wrote this. Oops, I think it's in all caps. Let me check. It is indeed. Mary Shelley. And it looks like Frankenstein might be a little bit, it might be bolded. I think it is. And you can use the same sort of tools that you have on, like, word processors and that kind of thing. I'm not going to bother with it, but you can use, let's see if, see how it says regular up here? You can do italic and bold and that kind of thing. I guess I will bother with it. All right, so that's that. Oops, one big mistake. This is in white, and I put it in black. No big deal. I'll select all of those. You can see over here again, we have no outline on our font, which is good, but the color here is black. I'm going to change that just to white, not blue. And we're good to go. This blue outline here that signifies there's a box, that actually doesn't show up. Right now we're in normal editing mode. If you want to see what it would look like actually finished, we can go up here to View and see where it says Screen Mode. It says Normal. That's what we're on. If you put it on Preview, this is what it actually looks like when it's printed or whatever you do with it. So it hides all those outlines and those sorts of things. Let's see here. So we got that white line to put in, and we got this little enriched classic box. I'm going to move this down a hair to make room for that that little box. Oops, too much. So we can make the line just as we made our black line before. Only difference is now we're going to set the line color to white. And I'll just draw it in here. Oops, let me hold Shift so it's actually straight. Okay. And how big is that line? It's got, it's 1 point. Let's bump that up and see. No, it's too much. 1 is probably appropriate. Alright, so there's that. Let's pop in that little box and then we'll call it a day. I'm going to drag this down just a hair, which means I'll have to move my line, because I don't want to cut off Aaron's foot with the box. Let's just tweak down our line here. Perfect. And now we've got room to put in this little enriched classic box. I'll make a new box here. I'm just going to make a little box. I do want a stroke on the outside. You can see it's got a line around it. And this center isn't exactly white. It's kind of an off-white, so I'll do that as well. Okay, I'll set it as black. Okay, and, well, let's see. This line is what, 3 points or so? Let's try that. Oops, and I did not have it selected. And I changed the minor limit, which does not affect anything at this point. Okay, so there's that, and these little guides are showing me I'm perfectly centered. My box is way too big, so I'm going to shrink it. And now I'll move it again. Okay, now I need to fill this box. I gave it an outline, but I did not give it a fill. Its fill is an off-white, so I will go over here to swatches. we'll use this yellow as a base, and then I'll just go in here. Oops, I didn't want it on the stroke. I want the stroke black. There we go. And I'll go in here and just shift this a little over to the white, so it's just kind of, it looks like white, but that's a little dingy, you know, a little aged. There we go. And there's our box, and now we need to type in here, so we'll go to our type tool, and we'll just click on this box. And I could put Enriched Classics if I want. I need to shrink the font size here. I'm just going to put our course name just because. And I will center this as well. Okay. Now one thing is this is right up at the top, right? See how this text is in the middle, whereas ours it's right up at the top. There's lots of ways to address that. What I'm going to do is go to character here, and I'm going to change its baseline. I'm going to go down into the negatives here. What that's doing is, you know, there's an imaginary line that text all sits on. So this is just changing where that line is. I'm going to put it down here. We'll do 8, whatever. That's good. And now we'll look at it in preview here, screen mode preview, and there we go. You know, I mean, if we wanted to, we could work a little bit more and make it a little bit closer to this. But really, it's pretty close as is. So that's the gist of how this works. Right now, this is in InDesign, so if I saved this file, which of course I should do, it's going to save it as an InDesign file. So I'll put it on desktop, and I will call this, you know, cover. I'll call it finished cover. I'll just call it cover because I'm going to use finished cover for something else. And now, we won't get to this till later, but remember we're turning these in as PDFs. Adobe is all about PDF. Well, they created the PDF standard. So what I can do is go up here to File, and there are PDF presets like high quality print or press quality. We can just select those. I'm just going to go with press quality here. And it's going to ask where do I want that saved. So this I will call finished cover. Put that on the old desktop. Now here you can tweak these settings if you want. You don't have to, right? Let's just use their default ones and see what we get. Okay, it'll spit that out, and it's done and on my desktop. Let me launch this. And there it is. Let me drag this over so you can see. There's our finished PDF press quality of our book jacket. We've got our mountains and our rocks, which we changed sort of their tint, and we made them look like an illustration after changing their proportions. We took a picture of our classmate and friend Aaron and distorted it in different ways, stretched it out, changed some hue, and applied some filters to make her look like Frankenstein. And then we put our text block in InDesign and this little badge thing. And that's that. So if you have any questions, you can of course address them in class or email me. But that's really the gist of it. And you know, a lot of this you just learn through playing around with stuff like we're doing right now. There aren't a lot of, you know, recipes to follow. What you do is you have a task like we have, and you poke around and you mess with stuff and you look online for tutorials, and that's what you do. Okay, so one last thing. Remember that we used external images in this. We used this picture of mountains and we used this picture of rocks, and these are Creative Commons licensed, which means copyright still sits underneath them, but we've been granted permission to do certain things. However, certain things are asked of us. In both of these cases, attribution. And that's important for a couple of reasons. I mean, the first is just scholarly. To avoid plagiarism, you have to cite where you got external material, and that includes imagery, it includes quotation, which we're all used to. It's an important intellectual property practice. Also, because of the Creative Commons license, it requests it. It kind of, you know, you have to do it in order to use it. It's not a big deal. Attribution can be satisfied a lot of ways. In fact, if you look at these, we can look at the license here, and it tells you, okay, you need to attribute. And so we know Andrew McGill did this. His real name is there, and we know the URL. So we've got most of what we need to attribute. If you actually click on his name, he tells you what's acceptable and what's not when you use his photos. His terms are pretty liberal. He likes to know when you're using it, and he says if it's a print publication, could you send him a copy? So if we were to actually print our copy of Frankenstein, we'd do that. We'd send him an email saying, here it is. We'd put in our actual book that we're using one of his photos, and we'd probably go ahead and put the URL for which one, the title of it, Rock, Andrew McGill, and the URL. And then we'd, send him a copy. For our purposes, what we want to do is have his name, the title, the URL. We want to have enough information that we can use to document where we got this from. Because we're not actually printing the book, but we do want to identify where our external material is from. And we do the same thing here with this mountain picture. This one's a little, you have to click on this one a little bit more to kind of get to his terms, because it's not one person actually, this is a service. But we still have, we can attribute it to TwicePic. It's got a title, it's got a URL. That's going to be enough in terms of attribution and documentation for our usage. So do remember that. We do have to essentially cite our sources. Just like you can't steal someone else's words, you can't steal someone else's imagery. So we do have to cite our sources. So I would write this down. I'm doing it right now. And I would put this in our materials to document where I got my imagery from. All right, that's it. I'll see you guys in class. Shoot me an email if you have any questions. And that's it. See ya.